Dr. Rimka, thank you so much for joining.
I'm super excited to be here, Inka. Thank you for having me.
Immediately when I found your profile actually on Instagram, I noticed that you have such a huge expertise field with different areas of health, and also you have like a very big toolbox of how to optimize mind and brain and mental health. And maybe you could give us a little introduction on like what's your background and what are you working at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So, that kind of jack of all trade thing is I didn't really plan on doing that. But when you end up primarily kind of focusing on autism, and which led into other mental health illnesses like bipolar and schizophrenia, you end up having to learn all this stuff because it's all so interconnected. And there are so many gaping holes in the Western healthcare model that my patients weren't getting help anywhere else. Nobody was telling them about their gut or heavy metals or toxins. So I had to learn it. Nobody was addressing their thyroids correctly. So I had to learn it, and even though they might be coming for brain issues, you kind of end up having to look at everything. And doing this, getting close to 30 years at this point, you end up picking up a lot of tips and tricks from a lot of other mentors and people who've been doing it longer than you. So now I'm one of those people that gives the tips and tricks to other clinicians, right? So my background is a little bit odd because I'm actually a doctor of chiropractic. I'm not a physician. I'm not even a naturopath, even though I know a lot of those things. I didn't go the symptom suppression, take a pill or a potion for something route at all. Chiropractic school and philosophy is very, very different than that. It's incredibly holistic. It's very vitalistic and the exact opposite of mechanistic thinking. We don't look at you as the sum of your parts and just take parts away and like treat the liver or treat the kidney or let's do this. Everything is incredibly comprehensive, and our backbone, pun intended, is the nervous system. So we look at the central nervous system as the most important thing. So we address the brain and the spinal cord, and people think we're dealing with bones or muscles. It's not what we're doing at all. Those are just access points to your neurology. I just took it a step further and then became board certified in neurofeedback and a few other various biofeedback technologies to read electrical activity of the brain. Specifically, mostly I was going after autism because my nephew is autistic. And I saw what the interventions we did with him that worked the most. And so I went down those paths very strongly. And diet, specifically the GAPS diet and neurofeedback, were the most potent combination for him. And so I said, I need to learn it, right? So anything I would learn, I'm like, let me learn more. And then from there, you just keep stacking on. You meet another clinician that has this tool. What is that? And you go to a seminar and you learn that. What is this? What is this? What is that? So I was hand trained by a tremendous amount of DAN doctors, which are Defeat Autism now. And so that's a variety of physicians, chiropractors, geneticists, a nice group of people with very different backgrounds. So we come at things in a really great way. And it's a lot of mastermind group thinking. People are very not competitive in the autism space. They're just trying to figure out what to do. And lots of neurofeedback practitioners or lots of psychologists do that. So that's kind of what happened. I thought I was going to go to medical school and be a surgeon. And through my own kind of trials through not being happy with the healthcare system when I was in college, I was getting adjusted by a chiropractor, but I broke my back in college in a soccer game. And that led to just lots of fear mongering, lots of you're never going to run again, you're never going to play sports again, and you might not walk again, and all of these things. And because I was a pig-headed, very stubborn 19-year-old, I basically said the big F you, get me to Keith, who was my chiropractor. And through that whole process, eventually I started putting, two and two together because my mood changed so much when I was seeing him consistently. And so I was like, I don't understand. I know I'm coming to you for pain. And that's all I understood. He would teach me, but I never understood it. And I was working after I graduated college. I was taking a year off to say, I'm not sure what I really want to do yet, what graduate degree I'm going to get. And I was working as a caseworker in a mental hospital for schizophrenics in Michigan. And going through the case studies, you read a book just 6 inches thick on like, say, a woman that's in one of these hospitals or trying to transition them to a group home to live in society a little bit. It's horrifying when you read what's been done to them and all of then all the problems that they have from the pharmaceuticals and the way they've been abused, many like physically, sexually abused in these situations by the nurses and the orderlies. And it's just, the whole thing was trauma after trauma after trauma. And I never saw anybody getting better. Like, I was like, literally, you guys can't get them better. And I just did not believe in my 22-year-old naivete and my Aquarian utopian way of thinking. Like, of course, everybody can be healed. Of course. What do you mean this is for life? I don't buy that. Maybe I'm too dumb not to fall in. I don't believe it. I just got to be people who've been healed from this, right? Who can heal themselves. So it was in just a moment with my chiropractor that he explained truly what he was doing to me and my own mood. And then I realized the schizophrenics need to be adjusted. That's why I went that route. And I approached school thinking of schizophrenics, bipolars, drug addicts, people in prison. And I was aggressively searching for those 4 years, that information, not sports or biomechanics or longevity, or, I couldn't care less about the Olympic athletes that we trained. We had a HIV study. I was a part of that. I took care of a ton of AIDS patients. That was more intriguing to me. And all the AIDS patients I took care of through clinical, my internship, they all had anxiety. They all had depression. They all had like panic attacks. So it was an amazing case study for me to start working with them and learning more and more about nutritional therapies to address that as well. Right. So, and different techniques, energetic and emotional techniques, that the way of getting trauma out of the body. So it started even in grad school for me because of the HIV study I was a part of.
I do love the point that you raised there, that nutritional interventions for neurological disorders, because I think that this is something that is too little talked about. Like when we talk about brain disorders, when we talk about mental health specifically, we always refer to psychotherapy and talking. But what if your mental health condition is caused by something that can be fixed with nutrition, or even some nutritional factor that you're causing it to yourself, and then talking wouldn't necessarily help in that condition. Can you talk a little bit about the brain basis, first of all, of mental illness? Like what can be the brain basis of depression and anxiety, or even these like neurodevelopmental diseases, and how does nutrition then relate to that?
Okay, so it's a huge question, and there's a lot to be said there. So there's many, I like that you even insinuated, there's many subtypes of everything, and that's not how psychiatry looks at it. Depression is depression to them, anxiety is anxiety to them. They just look at it as a neurochemical imbalance and you need this something for life, right? There's many subtypes of depression. There's many subtypes of ADHD. There's many subtypes of autism, for example, okay? One of the first things, always, it's not always the total root cause, but it's pretty much always there. And if we can't do anything if we don't address inflammation, so inflammation can be the sole cause of someone's depression. And figuring out where that inflammation came from, right? Like, is it coming from what they're eating, that they've created a massive gut dysbiosis and holes through the lining, what we call leaky gut, and they're letting proteins get in, and they're having allergic responses throughout the body. So they have, so what we call leaky gut, like, right? So that, I'm sure you've talked about this, right? You know what that is, like the gut, you're eating things, poisons that punch holes through the lining that should never be able to get through. These tight junctions, they're called, right? Glyphosate is a poison. That's a pesticide that's sprayed and everything that always punches holes through everybody. Nobody can stop it. There's only a few products on the market that can, to try and stop that, what's happening. So even if you think you're eating great, you're getting glyphosate. Like even organic food has glyphosate on it. It has less, right? But it's been found all over the place and all the rainwater. It's everywhere. We're just spraying our planet in poison. And glyphosate is designed to kill life in the soil. So it also kills life in your gut as well as punching holes. So then things get through. And over time, if you end up with a leaky gut, over time, you will always end up with a leaky brain. So there's a thing called the blood-brain barrier, and that supposed to keep things out of your brain. There's only supposed to be so many things getting in there. The brain is a very unique, isolated system that, it's only 10 to 12 things we really care about when it comes to the brain. I can measure, right? We have all kinds of tests where we can look at 300 little micronutrients and amino acids and all this stuff down in your big toe. Doesn't really actually matter to the brain. But the things that matter to the brain really matter to it. So inflammation is a big one. Toxins and poisons are huge. So to your point, talking about like, well, what might be causing it? Mold illness causes so much depression, so much panic. Autism, it's a massive causative agent, or at least propagating that. PANDAS, disorder can be people, they want to be stuck on thinking it's only strep. It's not at all only that. And some of these are hard to know. Lyme, PANDAS, SIRS, what is it really? They kind of look the same. And was it Lyme? Was it mold that was causing it? So you have those factors. You have nutritional deficiencies can cause that. So zinc deficiency can absolute chaos in the brain. 96% of all children and adults with ADHD are zinc deficient. Zinc deficiency usually leads to copper toxicity. Copper, they have this relationship. You get too much copper, you convert dopamine to norepinephrine way too much, and you get anxiety and panic attacks, right? So simple things have a huge impact. Low cholesterol. I don't have a single depressive patient that doesn't have low cholesterol. I mean, it's like across the board, right? If everybody is obsessed with talking about high cholesterol, well, I got a guy who's having 4 panic attacks a day. I just ran his numbers. His cholesterol is 130. It's a huge issue. So I have to explain that, like what the structure of the brain is. So if you just, you're an animal, right? You're made of red meat, cholesterol, and a bunch of minerals. So I'm pretty much like, if you need a bunch of red meat, you need cholesterol, saturated fats, right? So the brain is 70% fat. It's a bunch of, it's fat and it's liquid fat in a mineral-based conductive thunderstorm, like it's this beautiful biocomputer, and it's cholesterol and saturated fat. You need to eat a ton of it. So although every cell in your body is designed to make cholesterol, except the red blood cells, that should already tell you something. Why would you unduly stress it out by never eating it and forcing it to be constantly trying to make more? And it usually can't keep up. So I can't change the structure of someone's brain if I don't have the substrates in there to do it, right? So I have never seen a patient with depression with a cholesterol over 200, unless it was a traumatic brain injury, a concussion, like an actual physical trauma, or a toxin, like a mold, a known thing, like a tick bite, let's say, an actual, oh, wow, we have a huge infection and the inflammation came from that. That's what's causing it. Typically when people have it, this slow, gradual thing, and so, I've had it 20, 30 years, their cholesterol is outrageously low. And so that takes me over to the liver. I've got to look at the liver and how the liver is performing, and are they backed up there? And is that what's causing poor brain dysfunction? So this why I end up doing this. So far we have inflammation, huge, gut issues, microbiome issues. They're not as strong for me as that's not my starting point, like microbiome. I'm not going to micromanage that as much. I want to get dysbiosis gone. I want a candida can cause a massive amount of problems because they're byproduct of oxalates cause. So if you have a bunch of candida yeast overgrowth, they produce all these oxalates. People are very familiar with oxalates now, and like the carnivore keto space, that there's these crystal poisons that are in plants like spinach and almonds and kale. People are poisoning themselves to death because oxalates in the brain. I've been testing oxalates for about 15 years in patients with a urine test. It does a great job. And that oxalate poisoning and high density looks like ADHD, looks like anxiety, looks like brain fog. So it really does take, what's actually causing this, and how is it stacked on top of each other? There's methylation. Methylation is a huge part of mental health issues. So whether we're low methylation or less common is over methylating, that's a problem too. But so methylation's in at least 35% of all the people I see. I have a methylation disorder that's a huge causative agent. And that's being influenced by diet tremendously. People going plant-based, trying to not eat meat, they're all going to have methylation problems. So I don't care
Why
what
is
your
that?
genetics are. Pardon? Why?
Why is that? Yeah, the methylation problem.
Because they're not getting
by
enough. Yeah, they're not getting enough methionine and glycine. So methionine is your primary, right, methyl donor. It's an amino acid that's primarily in animal products, and then glycine would be the bone broth and the marrow and stuff like that. So the methionine is the donor, right? So I might have to use like L-methionine as a supplement for some people, right, to be pushing their methylation cycle. Then the next fit, we would do that people make a lot of mistakes with methylation, like with the homocysteine and stuff like that. So I don't pick somebody to start taking L-methionine. Don't start just taking SAMe, but we would normally we look at homocysteine, we look at the whole SAM-SAW rate relationship and see what's happening and see, okay, do we need to push this L-methionine for 4 to 6 weeks? And I might push SAMe in there to really push that whole, they don't have the methyl groups. They're not eating enough meat. I have to start pushing them. I change the diets. But if they have a lot of digestive leaky gut issues, they're not even getting them, right? They're not even able to absorb things and utilize them, right? Plus, there's cofactors, B6 and B12 and B9 and magnesium. So I have to like get the whole thing kind of, so I do use nutrients in a prescriptive way, the way a person would use a drug to try and get a system moving, like jumpstart a system again. And then eventually we can usually back things off, hopefully. But some people might have had such damage or epigenetic reasons that they're kind of on a prescriptive nutrient protocol, and then everything works well for them. Like they just have a really strong tendency towards poor methylation. So we need to give them a little bit of this they need a B6, P5P, an inositol, evening primrose kind of blend to keep their inflammation down and keep things going, right? So methylation, anyway, leads to, so the L-methionine you're missing, the glycine you're missing. So most people on a plant-based diet, then they're really, really high in folates. And folates long-term actually demethylate you. It's not very common knowledge. Everybody wants to give folates to people when they see MTHFR, SNPs or something like that, not understanding you're going to eventually downregulate the serotonin receptors, and you can make that person's depression much worse over time. It might be a miracle for a few, but it's going to make these people much worse, and nobody understands why. It's because you're actually demethylating long-term and making serotonin worse. So there's a lot that goes into it. Those are the big ones. And then just starvation. I would say plant-based diets, vegan is a starvation diet as well. So I won't even work with vegan patients anymore. And I was a vegan 12 years. So I kind of I was. Yeah.
So how was that for you?
It was horrible.
I
12 years, I'm that stupid.
I had the same experience. I was vegan, well, not vegan, but like a vegetarian, mainly plant-based, very low in. Also, I didn't eat milk or anything like that for maybe only a year. But I got such horrible side effects. Like I was brain fogged all the time. I had horrible acne and everything. So I
had a lot of acne.
It's not.
I gained a lot of weight. You're smarter than me. I stuck with it. I'm really stubborn. So I was 2 years a vegetarian, then 12 years I went vegan. And it's young, right? It's when you go to college usually. So it's like 19, 20, it's when it starts, which is a really dangerous time for young women and men. It's dangerous where your brains aren't done developing till 25. So who knows? I don't know how many IQ points I shaved off myself, right? I don't know what I fully did to my ovaries. So you're dropping in fertility, you're dropping in hormones, you're dropping how the brain is finishing. I definitely stunted it. And I pay the price to this day on some of these things. Sometimes people say like, why do I still take so many supplements or have to do so many things? I'm like, I was a vegetarian for 14 years, you guys. I drove myself into early menopause, diagnosed in my 30s. They had a hormone replace everything. They're like, you're shut down. You can't get pregnant. You're infertile. And through my sobs of all of this moment, through crying, through them begging me, saying, you're killing yourself. You have got to start eating meat. And I eventually had that moment and started eating it and stopped with gluten and soy, because that's the majority of when you're vegan, you eat a lot of gluten and soy, okay? Because it's the fake everything, right? Yeah. So Fergies and fake burgers and fake everything. I'm eating all that kind of stuff, right?
And also a lot of peanuts and oxalates, actually. And
Yeah.
anti-nutrients, at least for me,
Yeah.
it was
Oh,
like,
so many anti-nutrients. Yeah. The whole, it's all phytic acid, oxalates. It's just full of it. Tons of gluten, tons of wheat, right? Highly encouraged. And I look back now, I really didn't understand enough about seed oils. I don't think any of us did. That really missed our radar, right? And so it was tons of seed oils as well, because then what else you have to eat that if you're not eating any butter or anything else, right? Yeah, so it was a real unpleasant time, but like all good vegans, I lied. We all lie. We all lie to ourselves and we lie to each other. And so when the doctors finally convinced me through my tears, and I had to have a real kind of spiritual looking at nature and lions and hunting gazelle and going, well, you know, and I was in other countries in Brazil. I'd done mission trips. And then in those 14 years, I did have these moments where I would eat meat because I was on mission trips. I did doctor mission trips going into third world countries. And so would be with a group of like 20 plus doctors, and we go into, like, we're staying at a convent and we just get driven into some total ghetto in Brazil, and we're just adjusting thousands of people for 7 days straight. Okay. And so then people take you home and feed you, like at lunch. So strangers, and they volunteer from the church community. So we have our translator, they're, you know, kind of going back and forth. So you really don't know what you're eating totally, but you walk, these people are so poor. The idea of you would never, you're going to eat whatever they're giving you. I mean, we were all clear. Yeah. And so in my one group, one time, one year, there were 4 of us, there was 20 some doctors, but we went to many locations. And there were 4 doctors. I was the only student on this trip. I was the only student allowed to go. So those are all licensed practicing doctors, but I was still in my internship. And my friend just looked, and there's putting the 4 of us are at the table, and this family wouldn't eat with us, which made us uncomfortable. We're like, why aren't they eating with us? You know, they treat you like celebrities. I'm like, we're really uncomfortable. We don't know what to do, right? And we just kind of look at each other like, first of all, I don't want to eat all their food. And the translator was like, oh no, if you don't eat, you will insult them. Like, you eat, don't you hesitate, because she's been doing this all day. I'm like, oh, okay. And my friend looked, he goes, who else is a vegetarian at the table? And of the 4 of us, 3 of us were vegetarians. And my friend Skylar just says, well, I'm not today. And I said, right. He's like, you gonna be okay? I'm like, yep. Hey, don't tell me what it is. And every time I would do one of these things, all the doctors would get back at the end of the night and share stories. And they like, how you doing? Everybody was worried, because I was like the strictest vegan. Everybody knew about me pretty hard. I didn't wear leather belts. I was super hardcore. And like, they're thinking my stomach's going to hurt. I'm going to be sick. Like, oh, I'm like, I feel great. You know, I'd go, nope, I'm cooking just fine. I would always feel great, but I still denied that. Even
you know what? I've heard that from so many people. Like, when they go into being vegan, they get all these gut issues and bloating and stomach pain and brain fog. They go, and they go back to meat eating, and they feel great. Like, because that's what your body is made to digest.
You feel totally different. So when I made that decision, when they were so sick and I was on estrogen and everything, you need everything because you're a mess. Thyroid, you shut down, you need thyroid hormone. And 6 months later, I got pregnant. I was like, oh, I thought I couldn't get pregnant, you know? And they were like, I go, what do I do? I go, is this real? You know? And they're like, yeah, stop taking the estrogen, stop taking everything right now. And they said, well, I'm not sure this is going to go to term, but if anything's going to jumpstart your body making your hormones, it's pregnancy. So let's see what happens. I'm like, okay. And it was a horribly high risk, hard pregnancy, but I have a 16-year-old son to show for it. So, and I've never not eaten meat again. And he's been raised eating a ton of meat. So,
congratulations on the whole journey and discovery. And you must feel extremely grateful for all of that to have happened.
Oh yeah. And I remember what was amazing. It was like these 2 doctors having that moment with me, but there were about 7 or 8 that said it before. You've got to stop being a vegetarian, Stephanie, please. So there were, and these were all chiropractors, by the way. These were all, you know, and like, please stop. But it was finally a geneticist who looked at everything and was like, this is killing you. You can't eat like this. I mean, this doesn't make any sense for who you are. And I'm like, And so they were very gentle with me, and they approached me. They go, we know you're doing this for spiritual reasons, and I respect that, but they helped me reframe it. I forget what book they told me to read, but I started looking at, that's when I started going down the anthropology indigenous tribe. I'm like, yeah, I don't judge. We all revere Native Americans and the original people of Australia, the Hudzu. We all do. We go, oh, they're so sacred and their rituals, and we go copy them and pay money to do sweat lodges. And when you look at it, like, well, they all hunt and eat just a ton of meat. None of them are vegetarians, like, this doesn't make, and then we don't think they're evil or bad. We think they're the most spiritually connected people. So why would we make this distorted thing? So I do see it very differently. So that's a big problem. I see the sickest patients I've ever seen are vegans. They all are mentally ill. They're all depressed. They all have thyroid disorders. Thyroid, that causes a tremendous amount of mental health problems, right? That's something that people will think they have depression or ADHD. They don't at all. They just have a thyroid that's crashed, and they need thyroid support. So I can't tell you how many patients I've seen come in, adults, this is always usually adults, that are on ADHD medication from their physician. And all it was is actually, they had a thyroid disorder and nobody caught it. I'm like, cause I do a brain map. I look at the whole thing. I'm like, you don't have ADHD. I get you have symptoms. And then I look at the labs and I go, no one told you have Hashimoto's? Like, what do you mean? I went, you have, I don't know what to say right now. You need thyroid hormones, not Ritalin. So yeah, I go, you might not need neurofeedback. You need let's do this first. Let's fix we can go with hormones. We can go deeper and try and regulate your thyroid. If you want to put in the work, we can do that too. And you could just take thyroid hormone and go on with your life. Like, not everybody wants to do all the work, Inka. You know what I mean? They don't want to wake up to see the sunlight. They don't want to do ketosis. They don't want to work out. They don't want to manage their stress. I can't always get that to happen. It's up to how much effort do you want to put into this? Not everybody's going to go under red lights and do the sauna and do cold plunging, right? Many people will. But at least if you're going to go some type of pharmaceutical route, shouldn't it be accurate and actually addressing what's going on? So if I can, with a thyroid disorder, I can get them to change their diet. I can say, hey, you can't have the soy, the gluten, you really shouldn't have pasteurized dairy. If I can get them to do these things, and good. And then they can live with, like, you don't need Zoloft. Like, that's not what's happening with you. Like, let's address it. So there's a lot that goes into these mental health issues. And then autism. I don't know where you're posting this or what we're going to say, but we can just say the straight up word. A huge part of it is the vaccines. End of story. I just had a new patient yesterday, and that was the story. And it's sad, autism. It's really sad because now this kid is 11 and no doctor. He was diagnosed. So he was doing short sentences at 2. Said, well, actually, because I said about the vaccine. So I always want to know, did something happen? Was there, I always ask the question, was there any moment and whatever, how has it responded? Well, at 2, with that, I think it was MMR. He stopped talking. He was talking before, and then he stopped talking. I wasn't sure if it was this. I didn't know what to do. And they're not Americans, thick, heavy accent, Indian family. So they're not Americans, they live here trying to navigate our system. I said, okay. And then by 3, we took him in because he wasn't speaking at all. And they diagnosed him with expressive and receptive language, regressive language disorder, and he gets some speech language. Okay. Then by 6, he's diagnosed with autism. And by 5 diagnosed with autism. By 6, diagnosed with ADHD. By 8, he's medicated. Okay. Now they're seeing me. And I say, let's talk about what we've done. No doctor in all of this time, he's had speech language a little bit and ABA therapy. Nobody has ever discussed his diet, discussed his gut, tested anything like for heavy metals, for lead, for mercury, aluminum, nothing. He's eating cheese sandwiches, chicken tenders, a lot of Indian food, rice, dal, everything fried in seed oil, everything deep fried. Mom thinks she's doing a good thing I try to get more vegetables in them by deep frying them. in sunflower oil. So
Nice.
I'm in this appointment, like I've lost how many years? Because by 13, 14, that a neurodevelopmental damage disorder like autism, it's done. Whatever's locked in that brain by 14, that's the IQ we're going to get. That's it. That's that's the most correction we're going to get at that point when that puberty hits in about 14. Now we can do things to mitigate symptoms and all kind, we still have to, we can do neurofeedback and dietary choices and all kinds of things, but I only have 3 years now. I'm infuriated by this. It's disgusting. It's malpractice. So now I've got to have this whole conversation of, they have no idea what gluten is doing. They have no idea what that dairy is doing. How has no doctor never told them this? I think it's malfeasance and malpractice. I don't understand it. Yeah. So
yeah, I actually talk a lot about my migraine and how I was a chronic migraine. I was a very severe cases. I was like injected with botulinum toxin and IV therapy all the time, or IV treatments at the emergency because nothing helped. I had like almost 28 migraines a month. It was horrible. And I was never tested with my gut issues. I was never tested with anything like nutritional status, not hormones. Like no doctor ever told me, how about you go and measure your estrogen levels, or what do you eat? How is your diet?
Right.
Like
I don't understand what they're doing. I'm so sorry, because migraines are really horrific for people, and many of them are subtypes seizures, so we look at them as wow.
And now I'm fine. Like I have maybe, well, I still have the migraine, but I don't really get them that much. And if I get them, I know what's causing it. If I get high stress or whatever, but like I've done so many different like lifestyle interventions now within the past 10 years. I stopped medication when I was just before I was 20. I was like, these are not working. I got horrible side effects and like nothing helped. And then I started like reading into the science, and I was like, there is this thing of inflammation. There is this thing of gut-brain axis. Of course, then I went to study neuropsychology at the uni and stuff, so I learned a lot more as well. But like I'm very shocked on how we don't really address these things. And the other thing is depression, like depression is not some sort of SSRI deficiency or according to the new views, as at least like the new studies and models of depression, it's not even maybe a single disease or disorder. It can be caused by multiple factors, and we should measure, maybe it's a gut thing, for example.
Yeah, like you're saying, talk therapy will do nothing for depression caused from a gut disorder. Talk therapy will do nothing for depression caused by a thyroid disorder. Talk therapy will do nothing for that, other than teach you maybe how to cope and live with feeling bad. I say, why would you want to learn to manage feeling like shit? Just let's heal it. Let's teach you that you can heal yourself. Stop teaching people that they're powerless victims and they can't heal and they're going to be dependent upon you forever. That's just not true. But that's what people have been conditioned. Like the questions I get, like, well, there's no cure for that. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're the cure for it. You can cure anything. If everything couldn't be cured, there'd be no people left on earth. We'd all be dead. And we just keep having more billions of us and more billions of us. So clearly none of that's true. There is nothing that we can't heal, because somebody has cured themselves of. Even the most bizarre things that you would think, okay, somebody did it actually. And what they like to say is it was a misdiagnosis. There wasn't any actually spontaneous healing or anything. Oh, that must have been a misdiagnosis. That tumor that we're seeing, that couldn't have been there then, or the labs must have been wrong, right? They just can't accept it, because if you live under the model that I live under, that everyone can heal anything, period, that forces you as the clinician, you can't be lazy. You can't give up. You have to keep going all the time. You're like, I don't know how yet. I don't know what that is yet, but I can start researching, or I'm going to find somebody, right? So unless you have that drive, that kind of figure it out, find out more, and have the ability in your ego to say, I don't know. But just because I don't know doesn't mean it isn't so. Doesn't mean somebody else doesn't know. So let's find somebody who knows more than me or who's done this, right? But Western medicine doesn't, they have a really hard time with, if I don't know it, clearly it doesn't exist. If I don't know it, because I know everything, then there's no help for you. And I certainly would never refer you to somebody else to think what they might do would work. I can't tell you how many times with like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, I've got, they're better, they're done, they're fine, right? I put them in supposed remission for the first time in 10 years, and no gastroenterologist has ever called me up to say, what are you doing? Yeah. Ever. They tell the patient is, well, that can't be right. They're looking at the scope, they're seeing it's gone. Well, we finally just hit remission and it'll come back. It's going to come back because of what they'll tell my patients. And so they'll already put in their mind that nocebo effect of you're not healed, you aren't actually doing the right things, and it's going to come back no matter what you do, because what you eat doesn't matter, what you do doesn't matter. And I don't know why you're not taking my drugs and my steroids anymore and why it's like this. But instead of being curious and calling up people and saying, well, how did you do? And I have one gastroenterologist here. He's seen it at least 20 times with my patients. It's the same guy. Never has called me to say, what are you doing? Can you teach me? Which when I see that, when I see somebody who comes in my office from somebody, I end up calling, so can I have their name? And I call that psychiatrist or that therapist up. I'm like, what, can we meet? Because I want to know what you're doing. Because it sure seems like your people get really well. And I need to know if I should be referring to you. So can we meet? Can we talk? That's what I do. I don't understand why they don't do it.
Yeah. What would you, in your experience, you have seen so many different type of patients, so many different conditions. Are there any like general things that people typically get wrong? And what would be some of the fixes of if you want to, let's say, holistically just take care of your brain health and make sure that you are like balancing whatever might be going on there?
Yeah. Well, don't be afraid of cholesterol. Okay. I mean,
agreed.
It comes down to this. You want a healthy brain, you should be eating brains. Okay. And most people aren't eating brains. That's a different, like Asian only kind of, Africans and Asians. I deal with a lot of Americans, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Europeans, and they're like, what? I'm like, oh yeah. But when my patients start eating goat brains, they're like, they're delicious, and I get it. I'm not sitting around cooking up brains either. I didn't grow up that way. It does seem culturally weird for me, but lots of animal protein, lots of cholesterol, lots of saturated fat, lots of minerals. So the brain, again, only needs a few things. And the B vitamins and all these minerals you're going to get. And by eating all those things, I do want nose to tail. I like a lot of bone broth, bone marrow, because I need minerals. And if they're not going to extract minerals the right way, we probably might have a mineral supplement. I think minerals are really important, like such as Quinton water, hypertonic, or a nice electrolyte mix, like a good salt that from the earth, like here in the States, we use Redmond. It comes from Salt Lakes in Utah. You want to find something like that to keep, because you need to create charge. People aren't aware of how much electromagnetic charge that they need. So I start with that basics of the food, right? No seed oils, because that embeds itself in the matrix of the brain and slows down transmission. So if you look at it you're really not a bunch of copper, a bunch of wires up there in insulation, but people understand that. Like there's wires in your house, right? And they're copper. Okay. Your brain uses a lot of copper because it conducts the charge really, really well. And it's all insulated with something, right? And that would be fat. That's the myelin and everything there. So I teach them about, let's get the structure. Next thing, big thing is sleep. Like your brain is an energy hog. Oh, one, eat enough. Also, like, please do not be starving yourself. Although I'm a fan of fasting, I've been fasting for 25 years. I've done many, 50 over 10-day fast personally or whatever. Like people can, right now there's a big trend, and I have to be really careful because a lot of women are trying to eat one meal a day. You are not getting enough food. they're not eating enough. They're not able to produce the hormones they need. They're starving, not enough calories. There's just not enough energy for what they're trying, because they're also trying to do paleo, CrossFit and exercise and do all this stuff. I'm like, Mama, you can't get enough food in you in one meal. I'm like, it's just not going to happen. So I often have to teach my women to eat more, like 2-3 times a day. I don't love women intermittent fasting. A 45, 50-year-old woman trying to do what a 25-year-old man does is a very bad idea. So eat enough, right? Eat enough animal proteins, lots of minerals. And then we got to go with sleep. We have to, that's when the brain is going to clean itself out. So sleep is a major priority for me and my patients. I want it in total darkness. And the most potent hormone, I think, the most powerful hormone you might be making is melatonin. And I think it gets underrated and undervalued. That's cleaning out your whole system, and it is a carrier and messenger of light throughout the body. So, but it has to be in total darkness. So I think there's a darkness deficiency syndrome because people have way too many lights on. And they don't sleep.
And I do think that many people overemphasize the use of blue light blocking in the evening. I mean, I do, of course, it's important to block the blue light, but it doesn't matter if you have like very bright LED lights or over you and you don't get the darkness. Just get it dim first and then start doing the little tricks.
It's a good start for people, but it's also like, if you're tired at 8, then go to bed. Turn off all the lights and actually let yourself sleep. So really restorative deep sleep is important because that's where the glial cells will dump this in the lymphatics of the brain. We got to dump all the garbage of the day, right? So that's really important. Gut dysbiosis, it's sugar and the processed junk food. These are no brainers. But it's teaching people that. I do think if you're having any issue, like getting a functional test at least once a year, or even once every 2 years, something that's going to be looking at your gut microbiome, because you can have problems that are causing issues without any gut distress, right? Like I'll meet with a patient today, I have an appointment, and I was surprised, 2-year carnivore, that his organic acid tests and some other things are showing Clostridia infections, Clostridia overgrowth, and the main symptom is low energy and depression. And I'm looking at everything, and a lot of it doesn't make total sense. I have all this genetics, I have all this stuff. I got his hormones, and the hormones are low, but not that low. And what's going on? And I'm like, oh, because here we go. We have the Clostridias interfering with dopamine and serotonin deeply. So you can't even micromanage the neurotransmitters with amino acids or anything. There's no point. I have to get rid of the dysbiosis and bring balance back to the system. And even though it's unexpected with 2 years on a carnivore diet, doesn't have a yeast infection, but he has a Clostridia imbalance. So, I'll go further into why that is with him and pinpoint things down. And he's one of those, he's a smoker, and he's pushing some pathways that, he shouldn't be. And I'm like, well, we're going to finally have to have a hard conversation, because stopping smoking is one of the hardest addictions in my practice to do. I actually don't start there because most people can't handle that one. I have to get them ready to give up smoking, So there's a lot there's that, right? So the basic gut stuff, if you can avoid that, alcohol is nobody's friend. And people don't want to hear that, but alcohol is a neurotoxin and it causes more problems than it's solving. I don't care about those little bit of polyphenols people want to talk about. If you are struggling with anything, we need to, find you an alternative. I get you need something. If it's for stress management, that might be a case where talk therapy is good, right? If that's why, or we're going to bring CBD or kava or something into the system to help it give it something so it can relax and have that feeling instead of from alcohol. That's going to cause more inflammation. Movement, basically anything that connects them to nature. So just going to a park or a beach, changes your whole neurology. So just being outside changes the way the brain performs. And we have EEG studies to prove this. You are calmer, you have better thinking, you are better able to focus. All schools should be outside. If children were having their classes outside, you would see a radical drop in these attention deficit diagnoses. That alone, and we have the EEG studies from University of Michigan to prove it. You can think better, you problem solve much better, you're much more creative in just doing it, in just seeing nature. Even office buildings are doing, they'll put up fake, like bamboo everywhere, just pictures. Even seeing it actually helps you think better, right? That's how dumb the mind is at times, right? As a picture, I still think I'm outside, so I can think the brain waves change. Those would be some of the basics. Like, people seem to like breathing, light, food, sleep. What are you drinking? How are you breathing? How are you sleeping? How are you moving? If we can get these basic things going, how are you eating? Just a basic foundation. A lot of people don't need all these nootropics. Like they want to, what about this peptide? What about Bacopa? What about Huperzine A? What about methylene blue? And all these things, which are all cool and great. But can we start with the basics first before we start stacking things on that might just be overriding yet another symptom? Like, I don't need to just push your mitochondria to make more ATP. Why don't we get it learning how to utilize fat properly? Like, why don't we help it? Why don't we remove the lead poisoning that's breaking down all your mitochondria? I don't care what you do, how many vitamins you sprinkle on somebody. If they have lead toxicity, they don't methylate. They can't. You've just broken all the enzymes that do it with lead. You can magnesium, B6, B12, then B9 them so you're blue in the face. Never going to work. So those are the kinds of things that you might have to, if you're doing the basics and you're not feeling better, it is definitely time to see a clinician, right? But I like people to eat 2-3 times a day. I like them to manage their sleep. I like them to manage their stress. And stress management sometimes might look like sauna, cold plunging, exercise,
psychological resilience.
Yeah, all kinds of things that they can be doing for that.
But I love that what you are basically also saying here and emphasizing here is that get honest to yourself. Like, are your fundamentals there? Like, many people ask me, for example, how to boost dopamine. It's like, why do you have to boost your dopamine? Are you not sleeping enough? Are you like why? What's the reason for it? And if you are sleeping enough and you eat enough, you shouldn't have to try to boost it somehow. So
it's just those rare. I mean, they're by that time, those are the people who have been diagnosed with a mental illness. I think by the time I have somebody that's going to need maybe a dopamine support management system, maybe for life, they're already diagnosed with something. We have a severe problem. But if it's just this low motivation, low affect thing, it's kind of like, it's usually that. But then they want to look at their genetics and go down a rabbit hole. But see, I make low production and I'm a fast metabolizer. And then I go, okay, but one, what are you eating? How are you sleeping? What do you do for work? Do you hate your job? Can you not stand your wife? I mean, a lot of people, some of this comes down to, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to make some big decisions with your life. Because if you're an accountant because you became an accountant because your daddy told you had to be, but you really wanted to be an artist, we have a problem. If your spirit is not happy with it and it's trying to tell you something, and sprinkling a bunch of, mucina purines on somebody isn't the solution to them being able to solve what's going on with them. So you're right, they do need to tell the truth. I need to know the truth about what you're doing and how much alcohol is really creeping in there every night. How often do you really smoke? How often does this really happen? And there are other factors, and I agree. I love when people say that, I really think it's my methylation. Like, well, why do you think that? Because they heard it. Like, okay, well, so you've just been taking these supplements because you're pushing methylation. Why? Because I read about, okay, so you didn't do any testing. I go, no. Okay, so you could just be making the whole thing so much worse. And like dopamine, for example, high dopamine is a characteristic trait in schizophrenia. I mean, you have to be careful with dopamine. You can't just push things to push them. You want to be psychotic, push your dopamine too high. So, people, it's interesting. Yeah. But like, I've seen some of your beautiful posts that I repost some on that. You do a beautiful job of explaining the differences of what might do it what might not, and
Thank
showing
you.
we're different, like this person should not have rhodiola. Just because ashwagandha worked for you doesn't mean you're supposed to tell all your friends to take it. That's what I get really nervous about. And I happen to just see very, very sick people, right? So they're coming already hospitalized 3-4 times for suicidal attempts or psychotic breakdowns. Like we already have a very strong history. I'm not getting people who are trying to optimize themselves, really. I tried to get into that, honestly, and it's just kind of boring. And I think maybe people like you and other longevity guys might just do it better. And honestly, that somebody has to take care of the people I'm taking care of, because not many people are. So they're already like, it's a very different beast of what we're looking at. And with the brain, if you just get everything kind of top down working, like what you're saying, it all just starts to flow. You get these 10 to 12 factors and they'll make the dopamine and serotonin relationship like they're supposed to. They're going to, their endocannabinoid system's going to work like it's supposed to again. The gut and brain axis all knows what to do, but it's getting to the point where docs aren't telling their patients the power of the vagus nerve and laughter. I'm like, you could just teach them to laugh, right? And they're like, what? But they all want a fancy solution. I'm like, you can just do things yourself, but they aren't taught that. They want a script. And I deal with that, with patients. They do just, they kind of get mad if I'm like, so we're going to cut back these supplements you're taking, and we're going to focus on your job for the next 2 weeks till I see you is I want you to see the morning. We're going to work on seeing sunrise and going for a walk in the morning. They're like, what? Well, can I just take something to help me with I figure, don't my mitochondria just need something? Yeah, they need sunlight. So, and movement. I'm gonna need you to go outside. I mean, I'll have to say it over and over again. And they're just kind of like stunned that, and I go, would you like this better if I told you should pay $20 every time you into a bucket? Put $20 in a jar and then go see the sun and go for a 15-minute walk. If that makes you feel better, you've paid for your supplement and whatever. It's really interesting. If they don't pay for something, they don't value it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good message and reminder for us all, especially for the morning walk. I love them so much.
Yeah.
And also
that's where the serotonin, right? The sunlight, serotonin,
Yes.
dopamine, and melatonin are all made right there. So why do you need another supplement? You're missing the most important one.
Yeah.
The sun,
Yeah.
That's a big problem right now.
Yeah, it's so important for mood and joy and everything like that. And I actually, being mindful of your time, I still have one more question for you, because I asked you before this recording that what are the most inspiring things for you at the moment? Like what is something that you are really hyped about? And you said the neural correlates of joy and the brain basis of joy.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
can you tell like briefly like
Man.
why and what is the inspiration here?
Okay. Oh, I'm so down a rabbit hole of so I've realized recently that I've even been looking at neurology and functional status with people from a very left brain thinking, like my left hemisphere is the left hemisphere is very logic, linear, masculine, obsessed with words. It's all words. And the right hemisphere is feminine, holistic. It's all symbols. It sees the holistic, everything. Now, I am right brain dominant, very much so, always have been, but it's a very left brain dominant world. And so like, I'm also an introvert, but we live in an extroverted world. So I've learned to put on a major mask. I didn't know I did this. It's very unconscious to know how to perform, to be successful. I pretend to look like an extrovert to people. I can be do all of the things that they expect of me and be very left brain, be very masculine in the way I do things. So it's always going to be very successful in school because school is all left brain. It's all, right brain students do very poorly. They're often the ones that are called special ed, right? But they might have a brilliant intelligence there, but we don't understand it in school. It doesn't receive them well at all, if you can't do this type of thing. So I've approached it that way, but I've also, consciousness and spirituality are just this other, the psyche, I've always been also obsessed with that, just always taking every psychology course in college that I could, and debating on being a child psychiatrist instead of a surgeon. And so going down there in my own personal development courses and me doing shamanic rituals and psychedelic experiences and things like that. So I'm always there for the growth and the consciousness and trying to merge things. Recently, through going through ancient history and sacred texts, all of them, they actually are showing us all of these things. These books are based on astrology and neurology, and I never really saw it before until now. And I say all that to say, it might sound odd that I'm bringing it here, but the neurology of emotions, of joy, is all in the right brain. And I didn't understand truly the physical structure of how the left and right hemisphere come together in the corpus callosum, and then how the pituitary and pineal in the middle of it. When you open it up, and the way you look at it, it looks like angel wings, and it looks like there's a heart. And so there's always been this debate in consciousness, like when the monks, when we do EEG studies on the monks, and what we can do with neurofeedback to drive deep meditation and deep hypnagogic states, we can put people in transcendental experiences as if they did like an entheogen, and have like psychedelic visions, hallucinations, and deep core healing of trauma and all kinds of things. People will like basically see the face of God all the time. They'll have these experiences right in front of you during these neurofeedback sessions that go, it's a very unique alpha theta deep states training that happens. So I've been like, why does this happen so much? And it's because now I am understanding more, like with the monks, they're like, wait, compassion probably lives in the brain, not the heart. So there's been this heart brain battle. People want to say it's in the heart, it's in the heart. When you look at it now, it's actually, my understanding is changing, that I think there's a heart inside the brain, which makes then everything makes sense. And that's the pituitary and the pineal gland. And we're back to talking about melatonin as well as DMT, and how these two secretions that we make. And when you look at some of these ancient texts and why we have these sayings of the land of milk and honey, the milk and the honey are the DMT and the melatonin. And it's coming from right in there, and there's this heart, and that's where we ultimately see the face of God. And but it all comes in from the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere kind of portal is gratitude and silence. You can't have words and you can't have noise. So I've been a meditator for 20 something years, and I knew I needed it, but I was doing it because I'm a low methylating perfectionist, high performer, kind of low anxiety, depression all the time. Nothing's ever good enough. That's how my methylation makes me a little bit on edge. Those people, we have to learn to calm down, because we don't know how real well. We can't, we're just too much histamine, and we run around and very overdo everything. We overwork. So I learned a long time ago, I'm gonna burn myself out unless I meditate. So I was using meditation as a management tool, but I really wasn't and I've had transcendental experiences doing it, but not as much, because I didn't understand what I was really doing. And the right hemisphere, focusing on gratitude more and really sitting in the silence, especially in nature, the right hemisphere processes 6 things per second. So it's about 6 times faster than the left hemisphere. It has to get it all together, then it sends it over there. But we focus on our life, culture, school, society, everything, to ignore this. Don't be silent. Don't be idle. Don't go into theta. Don't lower your brainwave, because that's just, what's the point? You're not productive. Because that's when you have this moment in the middle where the left brain just goes offline, and you get into that heart space there, where the deepest expansion of yourself and your connection to everything, where that knowing of you lose yourself, your self is gone and the consciousness is there. So meditation for me has been a part of my life, but I haven't brought it to my patients as much as I should have. I talk to them, I try to teach them, but now I'm looking at it from a very different space, neurologically and spiritually, and joy related, because joy is a very unique supra emotion. Joy is felt on top of things. It's not an emotion, because you can be grieving the death of someone and still have joy simultaneously. That's what all funerals show us. So we innately know when something good happens, a wedding, a birth of a baby, a rite of passage ritual, right? Graduation, whatever. We come together. And by being together face to face, we say to people, I'm here with you. I'm happy to be with you in your joy, in your happy moment, or in your deepest pain. That's what joy is. It happens among other things, but it only is felt in connection with something. And that's usually other people, and you need to see faces. People can also have it with like God source. They can feel this with that God or Allah or Krishna, whatever word works for them. But many people, that's nature. They'll have these deep connections to the trees, the earth, and they'll have that same moment. People feel it with their pets. Okay, the animal, they just make each other. I'm so happy I'm with this cat. You know, make me so happy, and it's joy.
Actually,
so that, right? Does that make sense? So this whole COVID,
yeah, and like the connection here that I was thinking is the fact that when people report this, whatever peak experience it is, whether it's awe experience in nature, whether it's psychedelic experience or some sort of just social connectedness in loving kindness meditation or in real life, they report heightened sense of unity.
Yep.
And heightened sense of well-being and joy. And
that's all
yeah,
right hemisphere. That's all these golden memories, I call them. So even you saying that peak experience, for the listener, if you have a peak experience, a golden memory, go back, like when you're done, you could close your eyes, think about it for a minute. And you can even give it a name, like, you know, Durango Mountaintop. And you'll know what that means because you remember what happened on that mountaintop in Durango, or ayahuasca ceremony, whatever, or birth of my baby. Okay. When you just think about that, put yourself in that state, you completely unlock the right hemisphere. And it's all, you think of it in images. Don't think in words. They're bringing the joy right back. They're bringing gratitude and joy right back. And then that's the best place to start to meditate. Like if you can go from there, it heals you over and over again. Okay, you know, if they can think of a peak memory, if you're struggling with depression or pain or ill, think of it 10 times a day.
Yeah, it's even been shown in some studies that these like memorizing positive events increase the serotonin in the brain. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily have to, again, you don't have to take the tryptophan or the pill. You can go and memorize the memory if you want. Put a coin in the bucket, you know?
Yeah. Pay the supplement fee, and then, you know, reward yourself at the end of the month with a massage or something, or go get acupuncture, go do something like that, or save up for a sauna, or save up for a cold plunge, you know? And then you own a device. I'm a big fan of people having things that they can do instead of always taking things. More I can get them away from that concept. And again, doesn't mean I'm saying don't take supplements. And any of my patients will say, I use a lot of supplements, but you know, in therapeutic settings, like 3 months, if you have a thing, well, we need to do this for 3 months to bring balance, and then we'll stop. We need to do this, and then we'll stop. But yeah, so the neurology of that right now. So I'm approaching the meditation and the thinking and the joy factor. And I think the last 2 years in particular have been a very concerted effort to destroy joy. That in particular, I feel like everything has been designed to shut down the right hemisphere. Lifestyle, our culture already did it, but covering faces, constantly talking of fear, constantly talking data. It's been a lot of that. Oh, this study. So it's all left brain. And then covering faces, you can't actually create connection. You can't access the right hemisphere. It's taken people a lot of concerted effort to focus on gratitude in the last 2 years. And if you're a part of any mainstream, if you weren't doing this on purpose, your brain has been shut down and it's been hijacked very severely. And it's right. So having that heart center spiritual connection self, there's no way you're able to access it. And so why we've been frustrated seeing people that seem, brainwashed or like zombies. I'm like, you guys, let's be kind, because they've fallen into a trap that we've all been in. And a few, if you can pause, you can pull yourself out, but it's very hard. So yeah, I'm reading a lot and studying a lot and writing a lot of things down, and it's taking me in many, many directions, and taking me down a lot of religious sacred texts, because it's shockingly right there. It's
That's super
shockingly
interesting.
I can't believe what I'm seeing and going, I can't believe I didn't understand that's what this meant. So it's such deep symbolism that's going over neurology and teaching you, you're supposed to sit and be silent and be with each other and go with and create. The kingdom is right there. It's right in your heart. And if you just be quiet, you can find it too. And you're in control of it. And you don't need anybody else to access that point.
That was such a beautiful message to even like to conclude and end this podcast. So thank you so much. It has been such an inspiring interview, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure many listeners have learned also. Can you provide us a little bit of guidance on how to find what you are doing, your message,
the website and everything?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I hope people got some nuggets and some takeaways. And going to the left brain, please, if anybody is having any children that are having any issues, please go deeper. Please do not take that little bit of story and a little bit of a drug. You can do tremendous miracles through their diet, through brain therapies such as neurofeedback or other sound therapies, and do not wait. You cannot hesitate. If you're suspecting your 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-old is having developmental issues, I can do with a 3-year-old in 1 month what it'll take a year to do in a 10-year-old, as far as healing is concerned. So every day is wasted time, and I cannot express it enough right now, because the numbers are just way too high, and I'm getting even more nervous about what's about to happen post-COVID and post what we've done. You're going to see more delays. So if you're a parent, please don't ignore it, and please find somebody like me. There's thousands of me's out there, thousands. I'm not alone. Okay, doesn't have to be me. I'll help you find somebody if you need it. All right. So my website is just my name, Dr. Rimka, DrRimka.com. And you can find all of my social media there. Mostly Instagram and Facebook, Dr. Rimka. A few more popping up and you'll see me there. And YouTube, I try to do as much free content as possible, but for paid, that's my social media, YouTube, all free. I have a few free courses. I have an e-learning center. So there's that. And you have Zoom group Zooms, like Q&As with me. Then you can, I do take on patients all over the world virtually. So you can click the button how to work with me. I also do neurofeedback remotely now. So I can do home neurofeedback with patients. People don't have to come into an office 3 times a week. You can do it in the comfort of your home. That's a big one. But that's, drrimka.com.
Thank you for listening to the Mind and Psychology podcast today. I'd love to hear what really spoke to you in today's episode, so let me know in the YouTube comments in youtube.com/@IamInkaland. If you want to learn more about the topics of mind and psychology, subscribe to YouTube and Apple Podcasts to stay up to date on new episodes. Have a good day and see you next week at the same place.